Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored and humbled to be among you guys this week. I'm from the United States, which has been traditionally an ally and friend of Poland. My background is in QA and testing, which has traditionally been an ally and friend of developers, right? Who come from developer background or currently developers? All right, yep. All right. And who's from who voluntarily identify as QA or a tester? All right, good. All right. So it's nice to have all of you guys here together. Anyway, like I said, I'm honored to be here to talk about Agile QA 2.0, which is more of an ironic title. 2.0 is usually a euphemism for the next thing. I'm here using it more ironically in the sense that it's probably something that, in my opinion, hasn't even happened yet in 1.0. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Before I get started, I want to give you guys a couple of images so you can have them in the back of your mind as I talk through this. Does anybody know what this is? It's a fish? Okay, very good. Does anyone know what kind of fish? Or at least salmon? Okay, yes. That's at least what Wikipedia told me it was. That's what I was hoping it was. I'm not a fisherman. So a salmon, okay. What's kind of like the interesting aspect of salmon?
They swim upstream.
They swim upstream, okay. Great. So second image. A bee, yes, not a wasp. At least I don't think it is. A bee, okay. And what does a bee do? What's the inherent quality? It buzzes. It might sting you. It might hurt. It collects pollen. Okay, right. It goes around collecting pollen, pollinating flowers. Okay, so keep those in mind. The salmon and the bee. I was going to talk about birds and bees, but that's kind of a little different thing. Okay, so why the talk? I mentioned the idea that it's 2.0, but in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so it sounds like Paul's had some better experiences maybe than I have had. So in my opinion, Agile QA 1.0 never made it past staging, all right? So we've talked about it. We've had some good efforts, but it's not fully in production, in my opinion. So I want this talk to be kind of a call to action for everybody, devs, QA, managers, everybody, leaders, thinkers, just agilists, teammates, call to action to reinvigorate the state of the practice. And then at one of the open spaces or just in our conversations, I'd like to work together with you guys and have us all work together to think about better ways of doing things. So that's, I think, why we all come to conferences. That's why I was excited to come and listen to all of our great presenters this week. Okay, so just as a review, what have we learned? Or maybe what have we been taught? The kind of received wisdom. This doesn't necessarily mean we've learned this firsthand, and that might be one of the issues. But you guys have all seen this? Something like this, the relative cost of when defects are found, right? So development testing, acceptance testing, when it's down the line, it's more costly, all right? So we just heard from Chris talking about Deming and some of his thinking. So the idea that we want to eliminate the need for massive inspection by building quality in. Okay, this is kind of a well-known idea for Agile, especially QA and testing. All right, handoffs are waste. The whole kind of inherited wisdom. Mary Poppendick talked about this in her book. Moving testing to the front of the process. All right, these you guys are. I see some heads nodding. Hopefully you're not falling asleep, but these are familiar concepts, right? You guys, yes, generally. Okay, so we've even had a Agile testing book, so that was a great thing. I was really excited, because I had met Lisa and Janet So I was excited for, Agile QA. We now have our own book. There's all these great developer books. And okay, so that was a great advancement. David Anderson, many of you guys know. This just recently quoted in an InfoQ article. He was disputing the myth that Kanban is going to bring us back into waterfall. That he was saying that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. All right, so all these cool things that we've learned. So, of course, what do our card walls look like? We get testing at the end here. In QA at the end. QA over here. And test after in progress. Whatever, I'm not sure what's not in progress there. Okay, so and then testing, following development, following analysis. So this makes me very sad. On your guys' projects, have you dealt with card walls that look something like this? Yeah, and I've some of the other presenters' examples had the same kind of a thing. So it makes me sad. I don't know if it makes you guys as sad. Maybe not as sad as this guy. So how did this happen? So I have a couple of theories, and you guys probably have some other ideas. I'd be interested to hear. So I think Piotr mentioned yesterday, I think that was him, we tend to just kind of like repeat the same process that we've always done. So this is kind of how the board looks. This is how a card wall should be structured. We put the testing at the end, or QA. We're finished developing something. Let's put QA in. Another reason, perhaps, is that we figure that if we don't do this, our QAs aren't going to have anything to do. Right? So it's kind of like I think Hakan mentioned the idea of resource efficiency. All right, we need to. It's easy for us to see that the QAs are doing something because we've given them like a whole allocated spot in our system, right? And obviously the columns don't necessarily have to correspond to people. In practice, in my experience, they do, especially with the QA slot. Another thing, and this is part of my call to action, QAs aren't assertive enough to ask for change, to bring this concern forward. I like how Chris talked about how Kanban systems enable us as humans, to work and think about improving and take charge of our process. So why is this a problem, right? So we could just say, well, this is not why is there anything wrong with having testing at the end or QA at the end? And that's a fair question. Here are some of the reasons I think it's not helpful to have it structured that way. So essentially, we're kind of encoding a mini waterfall approach to our work, and so this is it kind of institutionalizes that longer feedback loop. So the idea that Boehm had, that the defects, when they're found later in the process, there's a greater cost. So there's a cost to that long feedback cycle. And this is a little bit harder to see, but it virtually ensures that our testing efforts are not aligned properly with business value. When we're testing at the end of the line, we're not necessarily aware of what the business's risks are, and we're kind of testing what we're given in a way that we understand we should be doing it. It's not always aligned with the business need or the most risky situation. And it reinforces this gatekeeper role that we try to encourage people not to have. Quality is owned by the team, at least that's what we say, and yet we have this kind of gatekeeping thing set up in our walls. And so it reinforces that oppositional relationship. I'm glad you guys didn't throw anything at me, all you developers, when you guys identified. So we're all on the same team. We're all responsible together, but there's like this kind of institutionalized situation for us. And it creates an inefficient test suite, which I'll talk about in just a minute here. If you guys are familiar with the idea of the testing pyramid. Yeah, testing pyramid? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, cool. So it actually in my experience, leads to the anti-pattern of the ice cream cone, right? So ice cream cones are generally good. I like ice cream cones. My colleague Alistair Scott has this image. It's the ice cream cone anti-pattern for, it's kind of like the upside down version of the properly aligned agile testing pyramid. So what happens is when we save QA for the end, and even more specifically for a person or a role to do, it really kind of limits the choices that person or that role or that action, that activity does. So it's usually kind of just a checking through the GUI kind of an effort. I don't know, do you guys find that that's the case? Depending on skill levels, depending on who's doing that. And so it forces, sorry, someone's phone. That's when we have it at the end of our cycle. How do we remedy these things? So some things that I've experienced, some things that my colleagues have been doing. Again, think about the salmon swimming upstream. It's like if you guys are anybody swim here? Anybody a swimmer? Have you ever swum in a current, against the current? Maybe I'm just weak, but it's like it really humbles you. You know, like you actually lose ground, or I lose ground when I try to swim upstream. So it's difficult. This is kind of our inherited way of doing things. So swimming upstream, bringing QA forward is difficult. But if we think like the salmon, we can do it. So it actually involves the whole team. So it's not just something that QA can just mind over matter thing to do. So when we bring QA forward, it allows us to collaborate with our developer friends, and devs and QAs can actually get along. But it allows us to identify the right places to test things. So it provides a structure, it provides a collaboration point for getting that testing pyramid right. So a lot of the times when we're testing things at the end of our cycle, we're not aware that things have been or could have been tested at different places in a much more effective way at unit level. Again, trying to push things down as low as we can go with our testing efforts. Getting up front, working with business analysis, people understanding customer or the product owner better allows us to align and make our testing strategy better according to what the business's needs are. Right? We're not going to just test whatever's easiest, whatever we can test. We're actually going to align our testing efforts with what the business is, what's important to the business. All right, so it's going to help us specify acceptance tests up front. So does anybody practice specification by example, ATDD? I see some kind of, okay, good. So some people have tried that. So again, just to review, this is the testing pyramid. This is going to allow us to have that opportunity to find the right places to test things. Right? It's not going to be all manual or even all acceptance level tests end to end through the GUI. That's actually we want a few, but relatively few. Okay. The acceptance test-driven development cycle, it starts early. It starts with the business, having that conversation, that collaboration together with different people in a cross-functional team. Okay, another thing that has been useful to me is taking a conscious look at our wall. So this might go against the grain of the Kanban technique of incremental change and adapting and inspecting in small ways. Sometimes it's useful just to kind of take a clean sheet approach to your wall, depending on what your team's appetite is and tolerance for that. But I've seen it work well. So it's kind of like a lighter weight approach to getting the same benefits as like a value stream map, or like a Lego value stream map. It's really nice. I like that. Okay, so another approach to encourage a whole team approach to getting work done is to impose your WIP limits not just on these functional areas. So rather than having a dev WIP limit and a QA or testing WIP limit. Have a general WIP limit across those things. You might have even within them, but also have a WIP limit that's related to your team's ability to take in work that includes QA. Okay, so it's all fine and good to bring QA forward. Put the QA slide at the beginning of your stage of your workflow, but it doesn't really necessarily fix the problem of handoffs. We still have handoff waste. So those yellow bricks that Hakan showed us. So how do we reduce the handoff waste? So this is an opportunity for handoff waste. This is a big one. If we were actually to visualize the waste involved in our card walls, and separate them physically, you'd have like ready for QA like way over here, and you could have like a big gulf between the two. But think back to the bee. How does the bee operate? Does the bee stay in one place? No? Yeah, like one of the things I love about summer and looking out in my garden is to see the bees like going from different plant to plant and just like seeing where they hang out, like they'll hang out on the lavender a little bit here, and then they'll go to like the rose over here, and it's really cool to see how bees are just kind of moving around. So think about how the bee works and how QA works in terms of handoffs. So the idea of quality advocacy. So the idea of QA, quality assurance, quality analysis, some people call it. So again, my colleague Alistair calls it quality advocate. And so if we think about that role in our teams as being an advocate for quality across the process. So it's consultative, viewing yourself as a service provider to the team, within the team, enabling and informing rather than gatekeeping. So big picture oriented. So a lot of times testing involves very detailed work. This is taking a higher view of our process of how QA fits in. Polyskilled and skill share. So just like any good developer on a team is polyskilled, we want QAs to be polyskilled as well. So have some technical knowledge, technical skill, but also to be able to share the testing skills that testers have with developers. All right, so you guys who are developers, do you consider yourselves good testers? Have good testing minds? It's okay, you can. All right, yeah, good. Okay, so this is where, so developers can help testers who maybe don't have a deep technical background. They can help them learn how to do programming, how to do simple things, how to understand code. Likewise, QAs, testers can help developers think with better quality ideas in mind, learn how to test things better. That's one of the things that testers are really good at. And courageous. So this is one of the Agile values. So this means not just taking on work that's given to you, not just taking whatever happens, but also trying to encourage the rest of the team to have slack time, to do what's right, to make time for the difficult things. Okay, so integrated QA. So QA is nowhere, but it's everywhere. Right, how can this be possible? So removing the QA column from your process altogether. Right. So okay, that's not too earth-shattering or anything. Okay, good. Okay, so rather think about the bee kind of pollinating the process all the way through. So another colleague, Alan Grimes, talks about this in terms of providing real-time, zero cycle time feedback throughout the process. So as development is happening, having that ongoing relationship with developers, whoever's creating software. And so one of the most common forms of bottleneck in a software team is the that happens. So testing, also developer resources, developers. That's oftentimes the most variable thing. It kind of smooths out these bottlenecks because we're enabling development effort with QA help, and likewise with testing work. So just consider QAs as part of being in the pairing rotation. So this is a pyramid pairing chart. You guys who are QAs, are you guys involved in the mix in pair rotation? Anybody? Yeah? No? Okay. So I would encourage you guys to think about that. See if it's possible to get along in the pair rotation with developers. And so, again, this is focusing on bringing everybody to the same goal, working to the same goal, which is working tested software. Okay, so if we take that out, does it mean that we have no place at all for end of cycle testing? Thoughts? Yes? No? Yeah? No? Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. So specifically, you might not be able to see this, but exploratory testing. So this is a helpful practice that this is the only card wall I've ever seen it actually depicted on. I don't know. Maybe you guys. Anybody have exploratory testing called out as a value-added activity on your card wall? All right. I love you. I love you. That's awesome. All right. That makes me happy. Okay. Cool. So. So exploratory testing, a lot of people don't understand quite what it is. It sounds like just like a cooler name for ad hoc testing. It's not just clicking around though. It's actually discipline into itself. It's a highly skilled activity, and it's meant to complement the checking and it's kind of the opposite of scripted testing. But the idea that we humanize our testing work by allowing our teammates to do exploratory type testing. Right. So again, it doesn't have to be the tester. One of the best people I've ever met, best teammate who was one of the greatest exploratory testers or had the best exploratory testing skill was a developer. And so he taught me a lot of things about exploratory testing. So it doesn't have to be a particular person, but it does have to be someone who has the right skill and has some level of independence. So this is where we get the idea that a lot of times management, other stakeholders don't understand how testers and developers can live in harmony. But an easy way to develop this independence approach is to basically just have a different pair from the pair who was working on the story or the pairs who were working on the story do the exploratory testing aspect of it. And then model it on the wall. So I personally find that it's important. If you find that it's a value-added activity for your team, it sounds like a couple of you guys at least have, model it, call it out as something that needs to be done. Okay, so I just want to throw it back to you guys. Maybe you found something useful in what I've been talking about, but to think about what are you guys going to do tomorrow? If there's anything that you want to rethink about Agile QA, anything that we might have learned along the way these many years, but actually haven't really invigorated our teams with a different approach to Agile QA. So, thank you guys, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys in the open spaces.